Hey everybody, this is Sheets, and we're going to be continuing on our journey to hopefully finalizing some good lineups for the DFS slate for UFC 310. For those of you who've been following along all week, we've been doing a video every single day, which is kind of tracking my brain and tracking my analysis as new information comes in. And what I think I'm going to try to do at the end of the week, or maybe even Monday, when it's all over, is just kind of like combine everything into one video where we kind of flash in and out of what I said on Monday and then interpose on that what happens on Tuesday or whatever. Just kind of see how, groupthink and how getting poisoned by content and how gathering new information to put a positive spin on it can change your lineups and change your approach and change your results and all that stuff. So let's think of where we are. So it is now Thursday. Props have been in, and I've also been absorbing some content, which means I've been accessing experts who are better than I am at knowing how these fights should go. Now, again, in DFS, it's critical to presume to some degree that the Vegas lines are accurate. Okay, so it's really probably not wise to take expert takes from a betting perspective or expert takes just saying, well, I think this line is wide, to apply it to DFS. You really should, if you're going to absorb content like that, try to figure out more of a style. In other words, if you feel as though you get an opinion that someone's going to win a certain way or their path of victory is a little more towards one way than you thought, that's the best way to really absorb content to kind of change your mind as to who you're going to be playing. If I say I liked, Vicente Luque or something like that, if someone came out and said, no, I think he's a bad bet, that's not going to be good enough. Okay. Now, there are a couple of people who I respect so much that if they have a very, very strong opinion that say, for example, an inside the distance line is particularly thin, then it should be better. And maybe I'll up my DFS exposure a little bit to those fighters, but not doesn't happen all that often. And yet, I get a little bit biased, like everybody else does, when they start listening. So I'm going to go over how some of that is already affecting me. I started building some lineups, and what I've been doing is, again, I've been preaching that you probably want to lock in this Landwehr Choi fight, and I still am of the belief that that is the case. Okay, let's review what I still believe to be true. I still believe to be true that this Anders Weidman fight is a pass. Okay, yes, the pricing is good, but I just have not seen a world where these fighters are going to score well. The props do not indicate much. The styles, I have not really heard anybody make the case that either of these guys have a huge wrestling edge or that the fight's going to even take place on the mat in the first place. So that's that. Other things that I've kind of learned over the last day, this Kennedy play, I think is exactly the same as I thought at the beginning. Not the beginning, as I did yesterday. It's got a good chance to finish in the first round. He's 9,400, or is he 9,400 or 9,200? He's 9,400, and he's going to need to probably finish in the first round. And, his inside the distance line is really strong, but we don't care about his round two upside. All we really care about is his round one upside. So remember, we talked about this yesterday. His round one prop was, plus 200? Something like that. Actually, it's now plus 165. So that means about 40% of the time, right? About that, he's going to win this fight in the first round, which means about 40% of the time he is about, 65% chance to be optimal. Maybe I'm spitballing here, because he could finish in the first 1 minute, in which case he's definitely optimal. He could finish in the third minute or the fifth minute without him even having more than 10 significant strikes and get some no knockdown KO and score 100, and he probably won't be optimal. But I think overall, I think based on the numbers, he still remains a pretty strong play. Chase Hooper, I still think that despite his price tag, has an incredible ceiling. The combination of his takedown, well, not so much his takedowns, but more his activity, which could involve takedowns, reversals, ground and pound, all of it. He just has a very, very strong ceiling here. Now, this is something that's happened. From the beginning of the week, I've been saying that Mike Chiesa is the better DFS play because his path to victory is predicated on grappling, which means that even if he doesn't finish, he has a better chance of getting there than, say, Max Griffin does. The other thing that I did not count on to happen, which is this line move. So Chiesa has moved to actually a small favorite, the very least pick him. And at 7,900, that now makes him a line value play also. So this has become a much stronger, a stronger play than it was. So we're going to continue to consider this kind of one of the core plays here. Durden and Van, somebody did put up remind me of something with respect to Joshua Van, is that he is a very slow starter. And the problem with that is that, okay, that's all factored into the line, right? He's still going to win the fight about, say, 65% of the time, 60% of the time. The problem is, though, is that if you are a slow starter, it's particularly poor for DFS, right? Especially when you're up against a wrestler. So if he's like a slow starter and lets himself get taken down once or twice in the first round, he's going to finish that first round with almost no fantasy points, okay? Which means that he has a real tough hill to climb as far as getting there in DFS. So Joshua Van is probably going to be a much weaker play than I originally suspected. And I just forgot that slow start thing is actually a very, very big deal in DFS. Cody Durden remains a very strong play. He's coming out there early also. So he certainly has first round upside as well. So this has not changed. All right. Cody Durden and Michael Chiesa are both very, very strong mid-range underdog plays. That has not changed whatsoever. The Brian Battle play is starting. I'm starting to feel this one a little bit more. He's just continued to improve every single fight. And Randy Brown, I originally thought that he was going to have a pretty decent inside the distance line of maybe plus 300. But the more I've looked into this fight, his path to victory does really not involve much of finishing. If he's going to win this fight, he's going to be able to somehow keep Brian Battle at range and win a striking battle, I think. I don't think that he's going to be going for a bunch of takedowns, which might not be a bad idea, but I don't think that's going to be his path. So we're now left with Brian Battle and his inside the distance line. And it remains, pretty good. It's anywhere between, it's actually crept up a little bit to like maybe plus 110. So throughout the course of the week, this Brian Battle play has started to improve. The Evloev Sterling, this to me has not changed at all. I think Sterling remains the far superior DFS play for no other reason that, again, in his victories, he's going to be optimal just an incredible amount of the time, given his price. Where Evloev, in his victories, not necessarily so. I mean, at 8,900, the Evloev experience of getting the guy down and controlling him without putting a lot of ground and pound up is not usually conducive to a huge score. And Aljamain Sterling, he's no joke as far as grappling. So I just don't see this world where Evloev dominates enough to pay this off. So it remains Aljamain Sterling, very strong play. And Evloev, I don't know if I'm going to do. The one that I'm really starting to get tempted on is, unfortunately, the Garimbo side of this Luque fight. I still like Luque quite a bit. Part of it, again, is my own biases. I just happen to think that it's a very strong step up in competition for Garimbo, and I think that he's, that Luque is probably a good bet here. But again, we have to try to separate that from DFS. some degree. Um, I've heard also, I forgot that Luque is like has brain damage. I mean, he's fighting now with brain injuries, coming off of a miserable performance, and I was reminded that his original fight was supposed to be some almost half exhibition fight against Nate Diaz. So it's pretty clear that Luque is probably on the way out, but that doesn't change the fact that I still think he's a good play. His inside the distance line is still very very respectable for his price. I'd say plus 220. Um, he has a similar problem to Joshua Van to some degree, though, is that if Garimbo takes him down and controls him, which he's going to try to do, he could give up a whole round of activity, which is going to affect his score, even if he does come back and win. So I'm maybe a little more down on Luque than I was, and to that point, Garimbo having all of this takedown upside, I think you just kind of have to play him. So I'm gonna include him in my kind of core player pool here, which is a little annoying because he doesn't have he has a terrible inside the distance line, but I feel as though plus 400. I mean, who would play an $8,400 guy with this inside the distance line? But the takedown upside of the control time, I think, is worth playing. So he's going to be included in that small group of guys I want to kind of target here. All right. One change that I'm making in this Anthony Smith Dominic Reyes fight is I am opening up more exposure to Anthony Smith, and the reason for that is this. Again, based on my content, based on what I've researched, and based on the revelation. So Anthony Smith, his inside the distance line is like plus 500. Okay. However, I don't, this inside the distance line in the first round of plus 1,000, that seems awfully wide. Smith, his problem recently has been his cardio, but he's been very, very good in first rounds. I mean, he was good in the first round against Ryan Spann. He just submitted Victor Petrino in the first round. His issue was his cardio now at this point. So I think that Anthony Smith, I mean, even if that line is right, so if 10% of the time he's going to win in the first round, I'll tell you this, he's not going to be that much more than 10% owned. So I'm definitely going to include him. Not in my core, but I'm certainly going to include him in my 150s. Dominic Reyes remains a good play. His inside the distance line is just too strong. It's minus 170 inside. First round, plus 215. Not quite as good as Kennedy, but still pretty good. Nate Landwehr, Dooho Choi remains a core fight. I would play both sides of this. The other thing is that, again, we'll do a little more lineup construction tomorrow. But one bit of funny business you could do is you could play Dooho Choi and leave some money on the table here. We'll talk about that tomorrow. But if you do that and you play, let's say you run lineups with Nate Landwehr and they all look good, just swap him to Dooho Choi. Yeah, you're going to cost yourself some projection equity in several ways. Number one is, well, Landwehr projects higher than Dooho Choi as a median projection. The other thing it'll cost you is that it won't allow you to, if you originally moved to Dooho Choi, then you could use that 6,800 on another upgrade. Let's say you were playing, I don't know, Battle. You could upgrade that to, say, Kennedy or whatever. But you're going to get a big break in ownership by not doing that. So I think that again, we'll talk about that tomorrow for more lineup construction, but this remains a very strong play. The Bryce Mitchell play, I still think is better than I originally thought Monday. I think that his path to victory, if he wants to go into full striking mode, then the fight is going to bust. But I don't think he's going to do it. I don't think he's got it in him. I think he's just crazy enough to just go for complete, full on Donkey Kong attack with takedowns, and he'll put himself in a position where if Gracie gets something, he's going to get submitted. But the point is that If he doesn't get submitted, I think that he's going to end up putting up a big ass score. So I actually do like Mitchell. Gan Volkov, I'm trying, man. I'm trying to get to this fight. To ignore a heavyweight fight like this in DFS feels like really bad. But the metrics are so poor that I'm just off of this. And then Rachmanov Gary, again, I'm just Rachmanov is just a perfectly fine play. The 5 rounds certainly doesn't hurt. And then here's what's the problem. The problem is that I think instead of doing what I thought I was going to do, that being just make sure to lock in both sides of this Pantoja Asakura fight, considering just locking in Pantoja and Xing out Asakura. And that obviously changes everything, right? Like if you don't play Asakura, then you don't get access to a lot of those combinations that I discussed yesterday. But from just everything I've freaking seen, you know, Asakura just is very prone to get taken down. And if that's the case, I mean, Pantoja, just this, I just keep seeing this 145 point fantasy point score, in a 5 round decision. And if that's the case, you just have to have all the combinations with them. You just have to. So it's not as if I don't think that Asakura can win. I still think that, that it's a good play, right? Because he's active. Pantoja, he's not particularly defensive. So I think Asakura in himself is probably a good play. The problem is that with that big, huge ceiling from the Pantoja victories, you just want as many combinations with it as possible. So I'm probably going to just go ahead and lock him in. That's my case as of today. Okay, so that's why we kind of go through this. And it's so funny when we go through the end result, you'll see the clip of me Monday saying, oh, Asakura, great play. Definitely 50-50. And then by the end of this, I'll have 0. And I'll be sitting here with a big frown face when Asakura gets a first round KO or something like that. Anyway, that's for content. So I guess that's my main difference, is that I'm now probably just locking in Pantoja. The other thing is that Chiesa has just simply become a better play because of his money line. I'm a little lower on Van than I was, maybe a little higher on Battle. And I think I'm going to get a little more both sides of the Luque Garimbo fight instead of just going with the Luque. And also Anthony Smith gets a little more love. Aside from that, no real changes. Tomorrow, probably the Sims will be out. So we're going to decide how many good lineups to make and how many fishy lineups to make in the name of taking down that big $200,000 prize all by ourselves. And those are my favorite. That will do it for the Thursday update. Good luck, everybody.